Welcome. This is a quiet historical story, told slowly. There's nothing you need to imagine, remember, or follow closely. You can simply listen or let the words drift past as you rest. The story begins in its own time, and it will continue whether you stay awake or not. The door closes behind him with a soft sound. Wood meeting wood, the latch sliding into place with a small metallic click that seems to settle the room into itself. The cold follows him in for a moment, clinging to the wool of his coat, to the leather of his boots, but it does not linger. The warmth inside is patient and thorough, and it begins its work immediately, reaching for him, drawing the chill away in slow, invisible currents. The room is small, a single window on the far wall, its shutters closed against the November night. A low ceiling crossed with dark beams that have absorbed decades of smoke and warmth, and the particular stillness that comes to spaces used quietly, purposefully, without haste. The floor is made of rough wooden planks, uneven in places, worn smooth by footsteps and time, and a braided rug lies before the hearth, its colors muted to soft browns and grays in the lamplight. The hearth holds a fire, though it is not large. The flames are low and steady, fed by split oak that burns with almost no smoke, releasing heat in patient waves that fill the room without overwhelming it. The wood glows orange at its heart, and the light it casts is gentle, flickering across the stone of the hearth, across the tools hung on the wall beside it. Iron tongs, a poker, a small shovel for ash. He stands for a moment just inside the door, letting his eyes adjust, letting his body recognize this place, this warmth, this quality of air that smells faintly of wood smoke and something sweeter, cleaner. The scent of beeswax and bayberry, not strong but present, woven into the room itself as if the walls have learned to hold it. His hands move to the buttons of his coat. They are cold still, his fingers, and the buttons are small and require attention. He works them free one by one, feeling the stiffness in the wool, the damp that has gathered along the shoulders where the evening mist settled during his walk from the barn. The coat is heavy as he shrugs it from his shoulders, heavier with moisture than it was this morning, and he folds it carefully over his arm, feeling the weight of it, the coolness of the wet fabric against his forearm. There's a peg beside the door, iron and simple, and he hangs the coat there, arranging it so that the shoulders spread slightly, so that air might reach the damp wool and begin the slow work of drying. The coat settles, and he can see small droplets of water caught in the fibers, tiny and dark, holding the lamplight for just a moment before fading into the weave. His scarf comes next, unwound from his neck in a long, slow motion, the wool soft and slightly scratchy against his skin, warmed by his body but cool where it was exposed to the air. He folds it loosely and sets it on the narrow bench beside the door, beside the basket that holds kindling, beside the worn leather gloves he left there this morning. The room holds him gently. The fire continues its low burning. On the work table that stands against the wall opposite the hearth, he can see the shapes of his tools waiting in the lamplight. A large iron pot, blackened on the outside from years of use, its interior clean and dry. Beside it, a smaller copper pan, its surface mellowed to a soft rose gold. A wooden spoon with a handle worn smooth. He moves toward the table, his footsteps soft on the wood, then muffled as he crosses onto the braided rug. The warmth from the hearth is stronger here, and he can feel it against his face, against his hands as he reaches out to touch the edge of the work table, feeling the worn wood beneath his palm. The small ridge where a knot once was, the grain smooth and cool and known. The room breathes around him. The fire settles deeper into its coals. The scent of beeswax rises faintly from the table, from the cloth that covers a bowl in the corner. He stands there quietly, his hands resting on the wood, his body beginning to release the cold, beginning to settle into the warmth, into the stillness, into the gentle readiness of this space that knows his presence, that has been waiting without urgency, without need, simply present and prepared. The table receives his attention now. He moves toward it fully, rounding the edge where the wood is darkest from years of hands brushing past, and he looks down at what waits there. Small things, simple things, arranged as he left them earlier in the day. The wicks lie in a neat coil, thin cotton cord that has been twisted and waxed until it holds its shape without stiffness. He reaches for the coil and lifts it, feeling the slight weight of it in his palm, the way the individual strands catch the lamplight and seem almost to glow from within. The wax that coats them is pale, not quite white, and when he runs his thumb along the length of one wick, he can feel the smoothness of it, the faint tackiness that tells him it will take more wax easily, will hold the flame when the time comes. The iron pot sits on the edge of the table, and he turns his attention to it now. It is empty still, waiting to be moved to the fire, but first there is the wax itself to consider. He crosses to the corner where a large ceramic bowl sits on a low shelf, covered with a square of clean linen. He lifts the cloth and folds it carefully, setting it aside, and looks down at what the bowl contains. Beeswax, pale gold and opaque, broken into irregular chunks that catch the lamplight and hold it, that seem to glow from within with their own soft warmth. The scent rises more strongly now that the bowl is uncovered. Sweet and clean, with that honey-like quality that speaks of summer and flowers, of work done by creatures smaller than his smallest finger. He reaches into the bowl and lifts one chunk, feeling its weight, its coolness, the slight stickiness of its surface. It is soft enough to take the pressure of his thumb, leaving a shallow depression that fills in slowly when he releases it. He carries the bowl to the table and sets it down beside the iron pot. Then he begins to transfer the wax, chunk by chunk, lifting each piece and placing it into the pot with a soft sound. Wax meeting iron, a gentle tap that is almost musical. The chunks pile up slowly, filling the bottom of the pot, then rising higher, creating small hollows and peaks, a landscape in miniature that shifts slightly as each new piece is added. When the bowl is empty and the pot is full, he lifts the pot with both hands, feeling the weight of it, the coolness of the iron against his palms. He carries it to the hearth and sets it on the broad, flat stone that extends from the fire's edge, positioned where the heat will reach it, but not overwhelm it. The pot settles with a soft scrape of iron on stone. He returns to the table and reaches for the smaller copper pan. Inside, there is already wax. Bayberry wax, grayish-green and harder than the beeswax. It was rendered weeks ago from berries gathered in late summer. It sits in solid form, filling perhaps a third of the pan, and when he touches it with one finger, it is cool and firm, unyielding. He carries this pan to the hearth as well, setting it beside the iron pot, angling it slightly so that the firelight can reach all of its surface. The two vessels sit together now, waiting for the heat to begin its work, and he kneels before them, adjusting their positions with small movements, shifting the iron pot perhaps an inch to the left, turning the copper pan so that its handle extends away from the flames. The fire continues its slow burning. The room holds its warmth. He remains kneeling, watching the pots, though there is nothing yet to see. The wax is still solid, still cool, still holding the shape it has held since it was poured and left to harden in the cool air of the room. He reaches for the wooden spoon on the table behind him, his hand finding it without looking, and he brings it to rest across the top of the iron pot, the handle extending over the edge. The spoon will be needed soon, but not yet. For now, it simply waits, as everything waits, as he waits, kneeling before the hearth with the warmth on his face and his hands empty and patient. The wax in the copper pan softens first. He sees it happen slowly. The edges where the bayberry wax meets the metal begin to lose their sharp definition, begin to slump slightly inward, releasing their hold on the sides of the pan. The grayish-green surface takes on a faint sheen, catching the firelight in a way that solid wax does not, and when he leans closer, he can see the first hint of liquid forming at the very edges, a thin rim of melted wax that spreads gradually toward the center. He does not touch it yet. He simply watches, kneeling before the hearth with his hands resting on his thighs, feeling the warmth of the fire on his face, on his forearms where he has rolled back his sleeves. The heat is steady and patient, asking nothing, simply offering itself to the wax, to the metal, to the air between. The beeswax in the iron pot takes longer. The chunks sit unchanged, for minutes that stretch and fold into one another. And then, so gradually that it is difficult to say when it begins, they start to soften. The edges round. The peaks settle. Small hollows form where the chunks press against one another, and into these hollows, liquid begins to gather. Pale gold and clear, moving with a thickness that is not quite like water, but slower, heavier, catching the light and holding it. He dips the wooden spoon into the iron pot, feeling the resistance of wax that is only partly melted, pushing gently against the chunks, encouraging them to shift, to settle more deeply into the growing pool of liquid beneath them. The spoon moves slowly through the wax, and he can feel the texture changing. Solid, becoming soft, becoming liquid, all happening at different rates in different parts of the pot. He stirs gently, the motion circular and unhurried, and the chunks of beeswax turn and roll, exposing new surfaces to the heat, releasing more of themselves into liquid form. The scent rises more strongly now, a sweet, clean honey warmth that fills the air around the hearth, and mingles with the sharper, more herbal scent beginning to lift from the copper pan where the bayberry wax has melted completely. Transformed into a pale greenish liquid that moves when he breathes near it, rippling slightly in response to the warm air. He sets the spoon aside and reaches for the coil of wicks. His fingers find the end of one wick and he pulls it free, letting perhaps 2 feet of cord unwind from the coil. The wick hangs from his hand, swaying slightly, and he holds it up to the lamplight, checking its straightness, its evenness, though there's nothing to correct, nothing to change. He leans forward and dips the wick into the copper pan, into the melted bayberry wax. The liquid is hot but not burning, and the wick enters it smoothly, disappearing into the pale green for a moment before he lifts it free. The wax clings to the cotton, coating it in a thin, even layer that glistens in the firelight. He holds the wick up, letting the excess drip back into the pan. Soft sounds, small taps of liquid meeting liquid, and then he waits, holding the wick suspended in the air while the wax cools. The cooling happens quickly. The sheen fades. The wax loses its translucence and becomes opaque, hardening around the cotton in a thin shell that is smooth to the touch when he runs his fingers along it. The scent of bayberry is stronger now, released by the heat, herbal and clean with a faint sharpness that clears the air and seems to settle into his lungs with each breath. He dips the wick again. The motion is the same, lowering it into the pan, letting it rest there for a moment, lifting it free, watching the wax coat the cotton, holding it up while the drips fall away and the wax cools. The second layer thickens the wick slightly, building on the first, and when he touches it, he can feel the difference, the small increase in diameter, the way the wax has begun to create weight, substance. A third dip. The rhythm establishes itself without thought. Dip, lift, wait, dip again. His hand moves steadily, and the wick passes through the liquid wax again and again, each passage adding another thin layer, each layer cooling and hardening before the next is applied. The wax builds slowly, patiently, transforming the thin cotton cord into something more substantial, something that catches the light differently, that has weight and presence. He shifts his attention to the iron pot, where the beeswax has melted fully now, transformed into a pool of pale gold liquid that moves slowly when he stirs it, that releases waves of sweet scent into the warm air. He takes a fresh wick from the coil and begins the same process here, dipping into the golden wax, lifting, waiting for the drips to cease, for the coating to cool and harden. The beeswax clings differently than the bayberry. It is smoother, more even in its coverage, and the color it gives to the wick is warmer, richer, a soft cream gold that seems to hold light within itself. He dips again and again, building layers, and the wick in his hand grows thicker with each pass, the wax accumulating in smooth, even coats that cool quickly in the air of the room. His other hand still holds the bayberry dipped wick, and he returns to it now, lowering it once more into the copper pan. The rhythm expands, one wick dipping into bayberry while the other cools, then switching, dipping the beeswax wick while the bayberry hardens. His hands move between the two pans, between the two colors, the two scents, and the motion becomes something like breathing, like walking, something the body knows without the mind's instruction. The fire burns steadily. The wax in both pans remains liquid, the heat from the hearth maintaining them in their melted state, and he continues the dipping, the lifting, the waiting. The wicks grow thicker. The wax builds. Each layer is thin, barely visible as a separate thing, but together they create substance, create the slow transformation from cord to candle. He does not count the dips. There is no number he is aiming for, no specific thickness he must achieve before stopping. The work simply continues, each motion following the last, each layer added to those that came before. The scent of bayberry and beeswax fills the room completely now, layered into the warmth from the fire, into the stillness of the air. His shoulders settle into the rhythm. His breathing matches the pace of the dipping, in as the wick descends, out as it rises, held steady while the wax cools. The lamplight flickers gently across the surface of the melted wax, creating small reflections that dance and shift, and he watches them without watching, his eyes soft, his attention diffused across the work, across the warmth, across the quiet room that holds him and his task with equal patience. The wicks continue to thicken. The wax continues to melt. The fire continues to burn, and his hands move between the pans, dipping and lifting, building layers that will never be seen individually, but that together create something whole, something useful, something shaped by repetition and warmth and time that moves without urgency through the lamp-lit room. The wick in his left hand has begun to show unevenness. He notices it as he lifts it from the bayberry wax, watching the liquid drip away. A small bulge on one side where the wax has pooled and cooled thicker than the rest, creating an asymmetry that his eye catches immediately. He holds the wick closer to the lamplight, turning it slowly between his fingers, examining the irregularity from different angles. The wax is still soft enough to yield. He sets down the other wick carefully, laying it across the edge of the table where it will not roll, and brings both hands to the uneven one. His thumb finds the bulge and presses gently, feeling the wax give beneath the pressure, feeling it warm slightly from the heat of his skin. He smooths it, working the excess wax downward with small circular motions, redistributing it along the length of the wick until the surface evens, until his thumb glides over it without catching on any ridge or thickness. He turns the wick again, checking his work in the lamplight. The bulge is gone. The surface is smooth. He dips it once more into the copper pan, letting the fresh layer of bayberry wax coat his correction, seal it beneath new smoothness. The beeswax in the iron pot has begun to cool at its edges. He sees the change in texture, the liquid near the sides of the pot taking on a slightly cloudy appearance. The beginning of solidification as the metal draws heat away faster than the fire can replace it. He reaches for the wooden spoon and stirs gently, bringing the warmer wax from the center outward, encouraging circulation, keeping the temperature even throughout. The spoon moves through the liquid with a soft resistance, and he can feel the wax responding, can feel it moving in slow currents that follow the path of the wood. He stirs in one direction, then reverses, creating a figure-8 pattern that reaches all corners of the pot, that prevents any part of the wax from cooling too quickly, from hardening before it is needed. When he lifts the spoon, wax clings to it in a thick coating, dripping back into the pot in slow streams that catch the firelight as they fall. He sets the spoon aside and adjusts the pot's position slightly, moving it perhaps half an inch closer to the fire, giving the flames better access to the iron, asking for more heat. The wick he set down earlier has cooled completely now. He picks it up and holds it to the light, sighting along its length as if it were something that needed to be straight, that needed to be true. It is not perfectly so. There is a slight curve near one end, a gentle bend that must have formed while the wax was still soft. He takes the wick in both hands, one hand on either side of the curve, and applies gentle pressure, bending it slowly in the opposite direction, feeling for the point where the wax will yield without cracking. The curve resists, then gives. The wick straightens incrementally, and he holds it there, maintaining the pressure, allowing the wax to remember this new shape. When he releases it and checks again, the curve is lessened, though not entirely gone. He bends it once more, patient, applying the same steady pressure, and this time, when he releases it, the wick hangs straight from his fingers, no deviation visible to his eye. He dips it into the beeswax, rewarding the straightness with another layer, and as he lifts it free, he watches to ensure the new wax flows evenly, does not pool or gather in any one place. The coating is smooth. The wick emerges from the golden liquid wearing its new layer like a skin, and he holds it up, watching the excess drip away, watching the wax cool from glossy to matte. A small drip has formed at the bottom of the wick, a tiny teardrop of hardened wax that protrudes from the otherwise even surface. He pinches it between thumb and forefinger and rolls it gently, feeling it come free, a small bead of wax that he sets aside on the edge of the table. The bottom of the wick is clean now, blunt and even. He reaches for the small knife that rests on the table. A simple blade, its edge dull from use, meant for scraping rather than cutting. He brings it to one of the thicker wicks and holds the blade at a slight angle, drawing it gently down the length of the wax, shaving away a thin ribbon where the coating has built up unevenly. The ribbon curls as it comes away, pale green bayberry wax that falls to the table in a small spiral. Another pass with the blade, another ribbon removed. The wick grows more uniform under his attention, and he turns it as he works, checking from all sides, removing small amounts here and there, never rushing, never pressing too hard. The blade whispers against the wax, a sound so soft it is barely there, just audible beneath the crackle of the fire. He sets the blade down and dips the wick again, letting the fresh wax seal over the scraped surface, restore the smoothness his blade has created. When he lifts it this time, the coating is even from top to bottom, and he allows himself a moment of satisfaction before reaching for the next wick, before beginning the inspection again, the gentle corrections, the patient adjustments that transform rough work into something refined. The fire settles deeper into its coals. The lamplight remains steady. His hands continue their work of turning and examining, smoothing and straightening, each small movement contributing to a wholeness that builds so slowly it cannot be measured in any single moment, only felt in the accumulated patience of minutes layered upon minutes in the warm, scented air. He sets the wick down on the table and does not immediately reach for another. His hands rest there, palms down on the worn wood, fingers spread slightly, and he feels the coolness of the surface beneath them, the faint tackiness where small amounts of wax have transferred from his skin to the grain. The fire has burned lower, not in a way that requires immediate attention, but lower than it was, the flames shorter now, moving with less urgency across the surface of the coals. The light it casts has changed slightly, become more orange, less yellow, and the shadows in the room have deepened in response, gathering more densely in the corners, beneath the table, along the ceiling beams. He breathes in the warmth. It fills his lungs completely, carrying with it the layered scents that have built throughout the evening. Beeswax and bayberry, wood smoke, and the faint mustiness of old wood, all blending into something that belongs entirely to this room, to this hour. The warmth settles into his chest and spreads outward, reaching his shoulders, his arms, the muscles that have been holding tension without his knowing. His hands remain on the table. The wooden spoon rests beside them, its handle darkened slightly where his grip has transferred moisture and warmth into the wood. A thin coating of beeswax has hardened along the lower portion of the spoon where it rested in the pot, creating a pale golden sleeve around the darker wood beneath. The lamp on the shelf near the window continues its steady burning. The flame inside the glass chimney does not flicker. There is no draft here, no movement of air strong enough to disturb it. The light it produces falls in a constant pool across the table, across his hands, across the wicks that lie in a loose arrangement on the surface, some straighter than others, some thicker, all of them waiting with the same patient stillness that fills the room. Outside, beyond the closed shutters, he can hear a soft wind. the sounds of night settling over the land. But here, inside these stone walls, beneath this low ceiling, there are only the small sounds of the fire, a soft settling of coals, a faint hiss where moisture trapped in wood finds its way to the surface and turns to steam. The iron pot ticks occasionally as the metal expands and contracts with changes in temperature. Small sounds like a clock that measures time in irregular intervals. He lifts his hands from the table and turns them over, looking at his palms in the lamplight. There are small deposits of wax there, cooled and hardened in the creases of his skin, pale against the darker lines that map his palms. He rubs his hands together slowly, feeling the wax begin to warm and soften with the friction, feeling small flakes of it come free and fall away. The motion is slow. There is no hurry in it, no purpose beyond the simple comfort of the action itself. His hands warm each other, and the wax continues to soften and release, and he stands there at the table, his weight settled evenly on both feet, his body swaying almost imperceptibly with the rhythm of his breathing. The copper pan on the hearthstone holds its liquid wax without change. The surface is still, reflecting the firelight in a pale greenish mirror that shows the shape of the flames, distorted and wavering but recognizable. The iron pot beside it radiates heat, the metal warm enough now that he could feel it from inches away, a gentle presence announcing itself to the air. He turns slightly, looking toward the hearth, and the lamplight catches the side of his face, illuminating the texture of his skin, the faint shine where warmth has brought moisture to the surface. His eyes are half closed, not from tiredness, but from a kind of restful attention that requires no wideness, no sharpness of focus. The room holds everything: the tools, the wax, the fire, the light, himself, with an evenness that asks for nothing, that simply continues to be. Moment following moment in a progression so gentle it feels almost like stillness, almost like the absence of time altogether. His hands hang loose at his sides. The fire breathes softly. The lamp burns on. The lamplight rests on the surface of the wax. The fire holds to its coals. His breath moves in and out with the same rhythm it has carried for the past hour, the past 2 hours. Time having become something that no longer divides itself into measurable portions, but simply extends, soft and unbroken, through the warmth of the room. He reaches for a wick. The motion is slow, his hand traveling the distance between his side and the table, as if moving through something thicker than air, something that offers gentle resistance. His fingers close around the cotton and wax, feeling the smooth surface, the slight coolness that tells him it has been resting long enough to harden completely. The copper pan receives the wick. The bayberry wax parts around it, accepts it, closes over it. He lifts it free and the liquid follows, clinging, falling away in drops that make no sound as they return to the pan. The wick emerges coated glistening briefly before the sheen fades into matte opacity. He holds it suspended. The wax cools. His hand does not waver. The scent continues to rise from the pans. Herbal sharpness from the bayberry. Honey sweetness from the beeswax. Both scents so familiar now that they have become indistinguishable from the air itself, from the warmth, from the quality of stillness that has settled over everything like the finest dust, invisible but present. Another dip, the same pan, the same wax accepting the same wick for the dozenth time, the 20th, the number lost somewhere in the repetition, in the layers that have built themselves without counting, without measurement. The wick thickens incrementally. The change is there, but cannot be seen in any single moment, only felt as a gradual increase in weight, in substance. The fire requires nothing. The lamp burns without attention. The floor holds its coolness beneath the braided rug, and the ceiling beams absorb the rising warmth. The walls stand as they have stood for decades, indifferent and patient, containing this small bubble of light and heat within the larger darkness of the November night. His other hand reaches for the iron pot. A different wick enters the golden wax, and the motion is identical to the one that came before it, that will come after it. The rhythm persists without effort, his body having learned it so thoroughly that thought is no longer required, attention no longer necessary. The wax in both pans remains liquid. The heat from the hearth maintains them in this state, and they will remain so for as long as the fire burns. For as long as he continues to feed small pieces of split oak into the embers, a task he performs without noticing, his hand reaching for wood and placing it among the coals in movements that leave no trace in memory. The lamplight flickers once, recovers, continues its steady burning. His hands move between the pans. The wicks pass through wax and air and wax again. Layers accumulate. The room breathes its scents into the darkness beyond the shuttered window. Time folds into itself, becomes circular, becomes a single long moment that extends in all directions without beginning or end. And in the small room, among the simple tools and the patient fire, the quiet extends itself further into the night, soft and endless and still.